Hi, this is an unscripted video looking at AutoCAD and how you set up CTB files. This is in response to a couple of queries I've had. First, I'm going to have just a quick look at the kind of the most basic way of setting up a drawing using Lineweights, just so I can kind of explain the disadvantages of using that method and why the CTB method is much better. So I'm going to open a file, and this is called by layer line weight. I've set this up, and when you look at this file, you think there's five white lines, and you would assume they're all on the same layer. Okay, they're all the same color, and they're all the same length, and I've got three colored areas at the bottom here: green, blue, and red. Okay, now have a look at the layers dialog, and I'll show you what I've set up here. Okay, so I've got 5 layers which have been given different line weights. Okay, so when they print out, that line, if a line was drawn on this layer, it should print out with a line weight of 0.05 millimeters. This one, called very thick line, would print out with 0.7 millimeters. Okay, then stuff I want to be colored green, blue, and red, they've got their own layers as well. But you can anybody that's used AutoCAD can instantly see a problem here, that I want black lines, which is fine, but the other 4 layers also want to use the black line. Now, everybody can't have the same color. It's just going to be absolute chaos. So we'll just look at this drawing. We'll just go to paper space and see how it kind of works out. Okay, if I'll click on this line, you can see it's on layer very thin line. If I click this line, you see it's on a different layer, very thick line. Now when it prints out, that's okay, because I can see the line weight, but when I'm working in model space, I can't. There is a button you can activate down here on the kind of helpers menu. We've got show and hide line weight. Okay, these lines are 5 meters long. If I just list one, you can see it's got a length of 5,000. Okay, now I've set the layer line weight for this to be 0.7 millimeters. Now, in relation to the length of the line, that's obviously not 0.7 millimeters. So it's kind of like a graphic representation of the kind of thickness of the line. It's not its true line weight. So you're kind of working in a false environment straight away. You're just this kind of very, very childlike kind of setup. Now, CTBs and line weights and the likes are one of the more contentious areas of the software. People have their own way of working, but in sensibility terms, this really is awkward. So let's have a look at what happens when we go to a paper space setup. Okay. I can see now the finished line weight, which is much better, but we don't work in paper space. We do most of our work in model space, and this is where the problem occurs. You get this kind of bizarre, kind of fudged line weight setup. It's obscuring detail. You can't see what's under the line. It's just not great. And the other problem being that these are all the same color, which doesn't give me much chance to understand my drawing. I can't tell, is this supposed to be a wall, or is this supposed to be a cable? Is this supposed to be a fence? You get no idea, because everything's the same color. Okay, because we want black line on our printouts, you've got to make the layer black. So it's a very strange method to work with. Makes it very difficult. When you merge drawings from one to another, you just lose control within minutes. It's very, very tricky. So the CTB method was developed fairly quickly. It's probably been in existence about 15 years now, and it's made the process much more kind of logical and easy to work with. So I'm going to open another drawing now that's had the layers set up in preempting the using a CTB. Okay, so I'll just close this file. Really don't want to see that one again. And I'll open my by CTB method. So you can see here that things are a different color. I only got one item on screen that is white, the rest are different shades. Okay, and I've got the 3 color blocks again, but these are slightly different color as well. I'll explain all this in a moment. Now the underlying logic in setting up your CTB is to have the brightest colors matched to the thickest line weights, and that way when you look at your drawing on screen, you're able to kind of understand what's the most important items in the drawing. So let's just have a look at the layers first, and then what we're going to do is make a CTB file to match this setup. Okay, now you can see everything here has got different colors. Okay, my very thin line I've given color 9, my thin line I've given it color red, my medium thickness line yellow, thick line, your kind of standard pen basically, I've given that the white color, and then for my very thick lines I've made it the kind of more garish pink color, the magenta, just so it kind of stands out on screen. I know that that's something that's very important. It might be the cut through the ground, it might be a boundary object. And then the other colors are jumping much further up the color scale. Things that I want to be green I've given color 92, things that are blue 152, and things that are red color 10. I haven't chosen the red. Okay, this will all come clear in a moment. Right, now let's deal with the setting up the CTB. So we've looked at the layers, we now want to set up our own CTB. Now, when you load AutoCAD, your CTBs, you do get given a little collection of CTBs straight away. Now you can find these in 2 ways. You can go to your control panel. Okay, so obviously we're using Windows here. This is Windows 7. And generally this is the way things look. And what we're trying to do is find 2 icons that AutoCAD or Autodesk will have dropped into your control panel area. If you go to View by and change it to large icons, then these 2 guys are much easier to find. So we've got Autodesk Plot Style Manager and Autodesk's Plotter Manager. So if you're wanting to set up a machine in set up a plotter in a specific way and use that again in the future, then you can save the settings that you make and reuse those. And these can be sent to other people as well. This creates little PC3 files that can be sent across the planet, so if somebody else has got the same machine, they can set it up the same way you had. Then we've got the Plot Style Manager, and this is where this deals with your pen settings files, your CTB files. So if I click that, then it opens another window. I'll just drag it into view. Okay, so you can see it's a pretty nasty route to where these plot styles are kept. So my computer is called T1500, and then the rest is set up by Autodesk. So it's app data, roaming, Autodesk, blah 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 blah. And you'll see there's a folder that's mostly filled with CTB files, but there are also some STB files. Now, I'm not going to discuss STBs just now because it's a whole kind of subject on its own, but really it's an advancement of the CTB file. Okay, it gives you more control and more color access. If you can get your head around CTB, then STB is very easy to pick up. I wouldn't advise you going straight to the STB initially. So we're going to deal with CTB files. Now, so this is where you've got a chance here. You could say, well, okay, I'll just let them stay in the same place on my computer, or you could actually get your machine set up with a bit more control and get your CTB files to somewhere where you can control them for future use. So it's highly likely that you're going to update AutoCAD at some point, and rather than having 2 folders with CTB files in, you just have the one and you tell your new version of AutoCAD where to look. So let's set that up. While I'm here, I'm just going to copy these files. So I'll just copy those. They're on the clipboard now. Okay, so I just needed that to find out where they are and grab them, and I'm going to set up my own location for my CTB files. So if you use the command options, so use the options command, on your files tab, go to printer support file path, and then plot style table search path. And you see here, this is where the software is initially setting up the location. So I can click that path and I can browse, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to jump to my drive D and set up another folder so it's there already, and I'm just going to call it CTBs. So I just want a new folder, I'm going to call it CTBs. Okay, so when I go to drive D now, there'll be a folder called CTBs. Okay, and your software will remember that. So apply that and OK, and I'm now in my CTBs folder. Okay, it's empty at the moment. Well, actually, the moment I set that up through the options, Autodesk instantly added this for me. Add a plot style table wizard. Okay, but I'll paste in the rest of my stuff. Okay, it's saying that the wizard link is already there. That's okay. So I can just copy and replace. Okay, so I've just copied the standard Autodesk CTBs, and because I need one to make my one, I'm going to use the AutoCAD CTB to make my own. Okay, so I'll keep that open just so you can see that the CTB eventually ends up there. So back in AutoCAD, we go to our layout. So you click on your layout. This has already been set up. I've got a viewport here. Inside, everything's set to scale. Okay, let's set this to 1:20. Okay, but I right click my layout tab, go to page setup manager, modify this, and we're just dealing with this top corner here. The rest of the stuff is fairly easy to set up. So I want to choose a CTB to use as a basis for my one. So I'm going to use the AutoCAD one. Okay, and then I can edit that. Okay, now this looks complicated, but it's actually not too bad at all. Okay, let's just hide the stuff below. It makes it a bit easier to see. So what I'm going to do is just define the first 9 colours. And these are going to be my set of black pens, and everything above colour 9, I'm going to let it print in its own colour. Okay, so I'm going to take colours 1 to 9, so you hold shift and click 9, and instead of these using whatever colour they happen to be, which is what use object colour means, I tell them I want them to be black. So this is your output colour. Okay, so it still remains red on screen, but when it prints out on paper, the lines that are red on screen will be black on the paper. Lines that are blue on screen will be black. Lines that are grey will be black. Okay, so I've set the colour. Now I need to be a bit more defined, and this is where I have to remember what I did with my layers. So colour 9 I'd set to be my very thin pen. So for line weight for colour 9 only, I'm going to use 0.05. The next one up was colour 2. Okay, this was my colour 1 was my thin line, so I'm going to make this 0.1 millimeters. Then I used colour 2 for my medium thickness pen. I'm going to use a line weight of 0.25. Then my standard pen, my kind of thick line, was black layer colour, and I'm going to use 0.5 millimeter pen. So it kind of corresponds to the rotating ink pens that we used to use a long time ago. And then my final one was my very thick line, was magenta coloured because it's a horrible colour, and I'm going to use, let's say, 0.7 for that. Okay, so I've made those changes, and I now want to make it mine, so I can do save as. Okay, and what I tend to use is a little phrase, black and colour, because it allows me to have black pens and lots of other colour pens. I'm just going to make that lowercase. Okay, if I save that, then that should be now in the folder, black and colour, today's date, time and everything, ready to use. Okay, I don't want to make any changes just at the moment, any other changes anyway, so I'll save and close. Okay, now I'll leave this AutoCAD CTB in effect just so you can see the difference. So AutoCAD CTB is currently there at the moment. Click OK and close. Now if I do a plot preview just now, let's see what happens. Okay, everything's in colour. It's like, that's no use. Okay, so I'll escape that. But see what happens when we change the CTB. So we go to Page Setup Manager, Modify, change to our black and colour CTB, and OK. Let's do a plot preview now. This looks more interesting. Okay, so I can't tell the difference between the thinnish lines because the plot preview is not in great resolution, but you can tell if I can manage to squeeze 3 on at the same time. Okay, that's my thickest line, that's a very thick, and then medium, and then they're getting thinner. Okay, and it's really now down to your control of your layering. If you're methodical with your layering, then things can become very easy to control. Now let's say I wanted these to be a bit less strong. Okay, so if I want to make these into more pastel type shades, I don't go looking for different colors for the layers. Okay, so I don't need to go and change the layer color. I like that version of green, it's just a bit too strong. I like that blue, it's just a bit too strong. So it's like watering them down. So instead of choosing a different color, because the colors aren't, there's not much choice here. When you're using the CTB method, you're restricted to the 255 colors. Is it 256? No, it's 255. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just water these down a bit. I'll keep the red one very strong because that's going to be, I would use that for maybe site boundaries. Okay, now we can't water them down in the layers control, we water them down in the CTB control. So right click your tab, Page Setup Manager. This is just off the screen, I'm sorry, because it's just the way the Camtasia doesn't capture below the area there. Then Modify, I can edit this CTB. Now if my memory serves me right, I'd chosen color 92 for the green. Okay, so that's my 92, and we've got an item here called screening, which is the intensity of the color. If I 50% screen that, it basically dilutes it or lets 50% more paper shine through. Okay, so I've changed 92, and the other one was, I think it was 152 was the blue. Okay, and maybe screen that by 75%. So I've made some changes. I don't want to save as because that would be needing to give it a different name. It's just save and close. Okay, let's just do a preview from here. You can see that the green and the blue have had their intensity reduced. I left the red unscreened. Okay, so the idea here then is that instead of changing the color of objects, what I would do is change the color of layers. So if I wanted more thick lines in my drawing, then what I could do is change the color for this layer. So watch what happens if I make the thin line magenta colored. I'm not touching the objects at all. I'm not going anywhere near the objects. I'm just changing the color of the layer, which is going to change the output of the drawing. If I do a plot preview from here, you can see that it's very quick then to change the look of a drawing. If you find that your drawing is too weak, you can move the layer colors up a bit into your thicker pen areas. If you think the drawing's too strong, you can start thinning layers down by changing their color, and it's much more controllable. Now, my black and color CTB has a very limited set of colors set up. I've seen CTBs set up where basically maybe every 10th color on the chart is used, and this gives you lots of colors to use for different objects in your drawings, and it's not over the top in the number of colors, so it can be quite manageable. Okay, let's have a look at a kind of an application of this on an architectural drawing. When you just use layer names like this, it's pretty ambiguous. It doesn't really mean much. Okay, let's remember these colors. So if I had thin line was red. Okay, so I'm not going anywhere near the CTB now. You basically can start to memorize your CTB, and it's very easy to apply then. Okay, so let's open another drawing, and I've got an architectural example. Now don't laugh at the drawing. Okay, it took me 5 minutes to draw this thing. Okay, but I've used my magenta layer color for this ground line. I've got my vegetation drawn with a thin grey line, and I've got the fill for the trees set up as well. Same for the windows. So when I just look at the drawing, if you stand back and just look at your drawing, you probably can tell I'm standing back because I'm getting further away from the microphone. When I look at the screen with the black background, I can tell what's important and what isn't. You know, the detail on the door isn't really as important as the shape of the opening of the door. So we've got a yellow line highlighting the opening, and then the shape of the building, which is even more important, is using the white layer color. And I'll just show you the layers list. So, you know, putting real words into the layer names makes this much more usable. So let's say I wanted to identify where the boundary existed on an elevation, maybe just draw a dash line or something. Okay, so I'll make that the current layer. Okay, and let's say I just draw a line upwards here, and this is indicating where the site boundary exists. So I'm not building my house outside of land I don't own. Okay, so I'll just pull those down. Okay, so just added those on the boundary layer. Let's have a look at this in paper space. Okay, I'll just adjust this slightly so we can see the other red line. Just squeeze that red line in, there we go. Get out of the viewport. I've lost my scale there actually. I'll just set it back. I think it was 1 to 100. There we go. Okay, now it looks quite bizarre in paper space, but it's what ends up on the paper that's important. So let's look at our page setup manager again. I'll modify this. I want to use my office standard CTB, which is the black and color one. Don't need to make any changes to it. It's just ready to use. Okay, and then I'll plot the drawing. Click on preview, and it's got more impact. You can see what's going on here. I've got a thin line around the trees and a toned down hatching there. The window fill isn't overtaking the drawing. Okay, I've got openings highlighted using a fairly thick line and then a very thin line for the window frame detail. Nice strong line for the outline of the building, and I'm saving the very thick line for the cut through the ground. The red is showing kind of something important, so that's my boundary for my site, and you know, it's clear to anybody what's going on here now. You're using the line hierarchy in a much more sensible way, and with the CTB method that is very easy to get your head around. And let's just plot this to a PDF. Take a few seconds. Okay, it's just processing. I think it's going to pop up. It has indeed. Okay, I'll just rotate the pages because it always does it the wrong way around in Acrobat. Okay, just drag it onto the screen, and there's the PDF created. You see the trees looks a bit kind of stripy. That's because that was solid fill hatching. It kind of translates the areas into thin triangles, so that you can get that looking a bit stripy in PDFs if you don't watch out. Okay, but the drawing's got the impact that you want to give, and it's very easy to change that impact by just changing layer colors. So you're not changing the drawing as such, you're just quickly tweaking layer colors to get a different level of impact for your drawing. Okay, now I hope that's been useful, and I'll follow up with an STB video very soon.